Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds by nerds, I'm Nerdcast Dave, and tonight I'm hanging out with this nerd.
I'm Nerdarchy Ted. How are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Good, good. But hopefully we even have sound for you and everything this time.
Well, you never know. I mean, it's a crapshoot sometimes. You know, technical issues, they can happen now and again. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, occasionally the OBS will just update or something, and be like, "Oh, all of those settings that you've had the same forever now. Yeah, we're not going to use those." So,
Yeah,
how's your Sunday going?
there's been a number of, problems of motivation and technical issues that I've had to deal with. So, yeah, we're here to talk about castles.
Yeah. Well, go low tech, way,
Yeah,
way low tech.
I would not mind, being at a castle and kind of chilling out, whatnot.
Well, castles present their own problems. Like for instance, Wi-Fi in castles and getting internet signal in a castle kind of sucks. In my experience, something about thick concrete walls that doesn't allow the signals through.
The last time I was at a castle, I had absolutely no internet problems whatsoever.
Uh, where are you using internet?
Yes,
Yeah, they say you're a bit low on the volume there, Ted.
I can speak a little louder if that will make everyone feel a little bit better or hear me a little bit better. Maybe Dave can adjust things on the technical side there, see if that corrects anything as well.
Yeah, I think I've got you adjusted as far as I can adjust you on my end now. So we'll see how that does. But so the topic for tonight is castles, and castles, have been with us since the beginning of D&D. Obviously, we're talking about medieval fantasy for the most part. And can you even have that without a castle or castles?
I mean, castles are a staple. I mean, even if you look at a thing like Game of Thrones, like each section really has their, or each house has their own castle to, some degree or another. Whether you're talking about, the Starks, down in this, down in their territory, whether you're talking about, the castle at the capital, or whether you're talking, the castle on the water's edge. Like every one of them is very distinctive and is stylized based off of, their locale, their region. So you could take, inspiration from those kinds of things so that when you're making a castle in your own setting, make it be regional specific and, more flavorful.
Well, when we were thinking about talking about castles in this topic, like a bunch of actual castles came to mind for me. From D&D, Castle Greyhawk being one of the earliest ones I remember, right? And it was basically just a big dungeon delve. And then lo and behold, in Forgotten Realms, they basically did the same thing with Undermount, not once but twice. Both in AD&D and 5e. Um, Ravenloft had one of the coolest castle maps, I think, the original module, because it was that isometric cutaway map of the castle, which was freaking fantastic.
Yeah, Castle Ravenloft was the first thing that jumps to my mind. But I mean, if you want to step out of D&D and look for inspiration, you could jump back into the 80s, to her childhood and look at Castle Grayskull or Snake Mountain. Those are two pretty awesome castles to go and explore, and both of them would be kind of an abandoned thing because they wouldn't like they're not actively used by major inhabitants. You're talking about a small handful of folks that aren't always there.
Still saying they're having trouble hearing you. Coming through on my end. Let me take a look in the audio settings and see if there's anything there. No, that's all right. Um, Ted, I'm just gonna need you to scream into the mic.
I mean, I can certainly project more if I certainly need to. I don't really feel like screaming, but
Let's hear some metal screams from you, Ted. That's what people want tonight.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be metal screaming over here, but I mean, I can certainly project a little bit more. Uh,
So, what do you think about when you think about using a castle in D&D for your, how would you implement it in your games? Where are the spots that you feel they most fit?
so it's really easy. Castles have pretty much every aspect of the game brought into it. It can be, as you said, an absolute dungeon crawl. It's an abandoned castle or an enemy stronghold that you're going and invading, and it's all about non-social stuff. You're going to go in, kick in the door, and beat up some monsters. Or the castle could be the backdrop for a very political game, and anything done via combat would be like highly frowned upon, and it's entirely a social thing. Or it can be a ruin, and it's there for you to like uncover lost civilization, whether it's like a giant castle that you are really only stumbling upon the remnants of something, or it could just be something from like a normal humanoid size, but it's been abandoned or lost to the ages. But what you're gathering here is the intel. You're getting, history that has been lost, and it's all about the exploration pillar. I feel castles super easy to tie into whatever pillar you feel like tapping into that day.
Now, one of the cool things too, like if you want to add, more flavor into your D&D games, if you want to actually do a little bit less work, you can look at real life castles that already exist, and oftentimes you can pull up the blueprints for those castles, so you already have the maps. There's history and lore, and sometimes ghost stories and myths and folk tale around said castles that you could take and introduce into your game. And there's a good chance too, like your players may not be familiar with that stuff if you're taking it from the kind of the real world and then you D&Dize it for them, for them in your game. It's something that we as Nerdarchy have a little bit of experience with doing.
To be fair, like the first time that Dave, Doug, and I were going to D&D in a castle, we were at a different castle than what they're offering now, and we had planned of using the lore that was associated with that particular castle. So we did a whole bunch of research on it, and we tied our story to what castle we were going to be going to. So like there was a lot of very easy aspects to use in that regards. So taking that map, taking that history, modifying to your heart's content, either a little bit, none at all, or a whole lot, really allows you to customize however much you want to completely fit the kind of game that you're looking to run.
Yeah, and like you said, it gives you a lot of opportunities to use all the different pillars of the game. For instance, like we used Caver's Wall Castle, and took the blueprint from that map, took some of the lore, and then we kind of like spun our own adventure up around that. But the way we did was there was kind of like a beginning, midpoint, and end point to that campaign, to the adventure. And the beginning was just like, oh, the players are at this castle for as guests. They've been invited. Um, you know, they're functionaries essentially. And then at the midpoint, something happens where everyone is trapped in the castle. It's basically under a glass dome, if you will, or a force field. They can't get out. But also, we also did something else where we kind of did like borrowed from Stranger Things a little bit and did kind of like an upside down version of the castle where you know it's the castle that they were already a little bit familiar with, but with a twist. Like this is the version that you might find in the Feywild, or this is the version you might find in the Shadowfell. So so it gave us the opportunity to basically have two castles in one, and but also like an opportunity to have all the pillars of play as well, right? It started off where it's all essentially exploration and social pillars, right? And then after we have the flip and things kind of get switched to the upside down version, now there's more combat, but now there's also more exploration because things are different than they were before. Now they might have had they may have like their counterparts that were in the other world, but they're completely different here. So they could see something that they would recognize, but now it's a threat or it's hostile or it's something they can interact in a way that they couldn't before. Because before maybe it was an inanimate object, but now it's alive and it's a creature instead. So there are plenty of maps on the internet where you can just take real world castles and do that. But not only that, like, as Ted mentioned, like we ended up having our castle switched on us. So we ended up in a different castle, even though our adventure was themed towards the original castle. And I quick did some cramming and research to see what the lore was around that castle and incorporate some of those stories, into the adventures that we were running.
So there's a lot of easy ways to go about making that kind of adjustment. I did not as much of adjusting as Dave did, but it was certainly a lot of fun to incorporate real world lore that's been modified to be able to fit your D&D game, and players get a real kick out of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would have been more impactful for what we were doing if they're like, wait a minute, I know this place, I walked through there. But that being said, most people are gonna be able to do that anyway, unless you happen to be near a castle that you can take advantage of, or if you happen to want to come to England and hang out with me or Ted as we run adventures at D&D in a castle. Links are down in the description. But even without that, like I love anytime you can take real world stuff and incorporate it in your games that the players can kind of interact with. Modern games are really good for this. It's a lot harder to do with fantasy games. With that being said, if you import a real world castle into your D&D game, there might be some things that you're able to get. Like, so a lot of castles have been turned into almost like hotels. Are you able to send away for a brochure or information so you can take that stuff and maybe turn it into handouts for the
Mm-hmm.
players, maybe with a little bit of work or a little manipulation in Photoshop. But also you probably have great photographs of the places in the castle that you could then show off at the table.
Whether you're doing a group chat and you're sharing these things online, because I mean a lot of games do function that way, that you're playing electronically, so being able to drop them in a group chat of like, all right, this is what the room looks like, and you just drop a straight up picture for everybody to see. And then you can look at, well, when players begin asking questions about specific things in that room, that's when you can make the adjustments, be like, oh well, they really care about this one unique chair or this particular decoration on the shelf. And if you're an on the fly GM like Dave and I typically are, it's like, oh, okay, well, those are gonna become the centerpiece of whatever it is that's going on, because that's what drew the player's eyes. Or if you want to go the other way, it's like, oh well, what nondescript thing did they not think about, and did not ask about. They'll have to come back to this room and do more investigating to find that thing, because it wasn't what was thought. um so like I enjoy that kind of stuff, and the fact that I play a nice mix of both theater of the mind, electronic, as well as at the table kind of games. It's a lot of fun to be able to put those things out there. And you know even if you can't send away and get the things to be sent your way, you can usually get, as Dave says, those blueprints or those pictures just on their websites, that you can just be able to, like, boom, this is what I'm looking at, and you can then bring that into a mapping program and make your adjustments, or just straight up use it as is.
Yeah, and also there's generally going to be things like heraldry and stuff like that that's already associated with that castle, and like you can reflavor that to fit your game world, your D&D campaign. You don't have to use a straight from from the real world lore and history, but you can take it and incorporate it into your game and be like, okay, do I have nobles or families that would be associated with a crest like this, or maybe you have the houses and nobles, but you haven't made crests for them already. You can just kind of borrow them from the existing world, especially if it's just your D&D game with your group and your friends, and it's just at your table. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're not trying to like create a product to sell and what have you. You just straight up using the heraldry that already exists, whether it be for Game of Thrones or actual historical aspects. It doesn't matter. Like you can just straight up use it, and some people will get a kick out of like, oh well, I wonder how this equates to the things that already exist. Because like, all right, you want to use the Stark and their dire wolf, but you're not going to use them completely whole cloth. You're going to make some changes. Okay, well you can have fun with that, and whatever changes the people or players notice, that becomes a little Easter egg, and whatever things are the same, you know is just fun, and you can allow your players to kind of make these associations and add in details since they've already got groundwork laid by something that already exists.
Yeah. So Kathy says there are some good description generator castles and rooms. Yeah, and with Chat GPT and all the AI stuff that's coming out and the innovations that are happening, like there's going to be more and more of that stuff that is going to be even less um, resource intensive for you, the DM, where you can just start putting in prompts and like you know the the AI, using the robots out to find you all the information on a particular castle, or maybe even to generate lists of castles, and then from there you're probably going to be able to to dive even deeper and get even more information than we've been able to get in the past, just because the AI just has so many more resources that it can use to pull that in. Its Google Foo is much better than ours.
So now, do you have any kind of profound or fun memories, aspects of castles in your own games, either as a DM or a player?
So there was something, actually. One of the cooler things did happen at D&D in the castle when one of the players, like, their backstory was they were looking for their daughter that had gone missing, and it just, and I was like, I wanted to have a way to tie that into the existing story that was going on. So one of the myths, there's a ghost story um, about a mistress that gets murdered and thrown in the well at the castle at Lumley. And so what I did was I made so I kind of like took that and twisted it a little bit, and made the ghost actually his daughter, that had a similar thing happen where the characters were kind of transported through time and space to this castle for this event by a cosmic being. Well, they're not the first ones to have that happen to them. It happened to the daughter before, hundreds of years ago, and they were able to kind of like unravel the mystery of what actually happened, and then put the ghost to rest. And then the ghost granted the party each a boon, and he got a chance to say goodbye to his daughter and to see that she actually, even though she kind of got misplaced in time and space, she actually had a full life up until the end, when things kind of went sideways, and they were able to put the ghost to rest. So to me, like, that was kind of a cool moment from that kind of came from taking an existing ghost story from a real world castle and integrating the player's backstory into it.
That's a lot of fun to tie history and character backstories that until they got to the castle, they probably didn't have that connection, that crossover. So it's a lot of fun to be able to knit that all up.
Yeah, I will say one of the coolest things I've seen by creators whose names will never be mentioned again at this point, I guess, was a bunch of like I think like movie prop makers built the Baron throne room from
Okay.
Eberron. Uh,
Okay.
you saw you were there. You saw it,
Yeah.
and it was so cool. Like the the throne rooms got bear heads mounted on the walls, but they were like magnetic and they could pop off, so they could put on like interchange the heads and do different ones, and also it was like lit up. It was a marvel of mini terrain crafting.
It was indeed spectacular. Um, you know, I don't have, any kind of grand craft like that. But if you're looking for a little bit, low key angle of things, 1985 Games has Castles and Keeps. So like you can have the component pieces to be able to put your 2D map down section by section, however you want to kind of create it. So I know I'm very fond of that for castles, and because they're two-dimensional constructor maps how you want, and it's very easy to kind of just be able to bring them anywhere in just your folder. Just memorize your layout, just be like, all right, just and lay out the whole thing and you're good to go.
Yeah, well, and also too stuff like that is cool to add some scatter to, like whether it's a dais or throne, barrels, crates, tables and chairs and that kind of stuff, which doesn't take up nearly as much room as like having a full castle to assemble, but it still like gives
Mhm.
you a little bit more three dimensional components. You can throw up some pillars. This is all stuff that I've seen Ted do in the past.
I tend to go a mixture of, pardon me, I tend to go a mixture of both 2D and 3D depending upon what I have access to. I like a tactical, battle map, and then putting three-dimensional scatter down. While it wasn't a castle, but more like a temple in the game that I ran last night, like I put out a folded battle mat and then added terrain of you know pillars and a statue, and then put the minis around it so that it was like it was a fully you know engrossed area. But I was limited because like that's my travel game,
Yeah.
so like to be able to cart everything basically in one bag over the bridge to our friend's house.
You just need like a Vast Grim style van for your minis. You can't transport any
Well,
people or anything. It's just gonna be your minis and terrain on
that would be
on
pretty
wheels.
awesome. So we'll start a GoFundMe for somebody to buy me a decorated van. How about that?
There you go. But if you wanted to see the game that Ted's talking about, it's up on the Facebook page. There is some images from that they can check out, and Ted's setup, which is it was really cool. Ted did a great job. He always does with that kind of stuff. I always feel self conscious running after him because he always does all kinds of cool things with mini terrain. I'm way more a theater of the mind.
And there's no problem with just doing theater of the mind. It's a preferential style. The D&D to me has a tactical element to it. So to know exactly what the kind of distances are, the area effect of things, that's just my preferred style. I have no problems. I've done it numerous times online. If a DM is like, no, I'm not pulling out a map, I'll respect that decision and just kind of go. And this is not only to the masses out there, but to you as well, Dave. Like when you're running here at the table, if you want this to just be a theater of the mind kind of thing,
You
we
can say
certainly
that
can
if
do
you
it.
want, but there will be a full scale mutiny. The torches and the pitchforks will come out. They will have
But
their terrain.
I did something that like I hadn't done previously. I while we're sitting there eating dinner, I kind of warned everybody. I'm like, look, just to let you know, as we're getting into the like last night was the finale for We Live on a Boat game. I'm like, look,
No
I'm gonna
castles.
kick you out of the room. Uh, so I'm like, I'm just gonna kick everybody out for a moment, so that it like Dave has seen many times the okay, well, Ted's setting up an encounter, and I can't do the Matt Mercer thing where I just bring out, everything all constructed
Yeah.
on a nice, awesome board. I just don't have that setup. So
Or
I
the DM
usually have
Scotty.
everything.
DM Scotty is like fantastic. Like he narrates, and as he narrates, he pulls out the things he narrates and puts them down. Like it is an art. Like I would put DM Scotty up against Matt Mercer any day of the week for laying out terrain.
Sure. I don't watch as many of Scotty's games, where I've watched quite a lot of Matt Mercer. Uh, so I'm not trying to put anyone on any kind of pedestals, but the concept of here is everything already assembled and laying it out in front of everyone, boom, here it is. I don't have that. I don't have the space for it. I don't have the ability to just make that happen. So I tend to be talking and laying things out. And there have been many times where like players, as I begin doing stuff, they're already taking pictures. So I was like, I didn't want any of that. I wanted them to just see it all at once. So like they left the room for a couple of minutes to just kind of like chat amongst themselves while I laid out, the statues and the pillars and the monsters. And I'm like, all right, come on back in. And I enjoyed like pretty much like everybody who walked in was like wowed. And it was very simple. Like I said, it was a map, 8 pillars, a handful of monsters, and like a massive snake statue. Like it wasn't an uber thing, but to just have the impact for a final encounter of like, oh crap, we're against all of that bullshit.
Well, but I think it really works too. Like, and it would work. Like that style will work in any setting. Like you could easily pull that off in a castle. I know you got the enough scatter to do it.
Mhm.
A cathedral and a castle. I bet would look awesome. With the pillars and the pews all laid out. Maybe a dais at the front. And just on the papercraft style terrain, it just makes it all pop, and it just gives enough so the players can visualize, see what's going on. They get you can see all the squares to kind of judge your movement and the tactical aspects of the game. And then the visuals kind of really adds to the immersiveness of it. Just remember your sticky putty so you can place your flying characters up above.
Well, I recently acquired legitimate flight stands, so I've got some new things to play with. But one of the options that I have for D&D in a castle is my essentially like a train your dragon kind of deal.
Yeah.
Um, so I was like, well, what if I pick up some Weavern mounts and some actual flight stands with different height levels, so I think I could have a little bit of fun with it. So I've got some things in the works, but I got to find out what my players are into. I've got 3 games that I'm gonna propose, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I'm in the process of surveying them. I think once the first survey is done, then we'll maybe go into another survey and then see if people are available to like Zoom chat or something to kind of like lock down what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah, that can work.
And I don't know. I might run a high level game just because.
So far, my players seem to be interested in tier 2 or tier 3. So I think that's probably the direction that I'll be going. So
Yeah, they're showing tier 2 or tier 4. so
okay.
so I'll be like, how about we meet in the middle?
Yeah, I initially was talking about something pretty high, and one of the players was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely not into that." And
Yeah.
I just know that when I was there last, they did like the kind of at dinner every night, people were talking about the events, and when you've got Mark Meir, B. Dave Walters, and Elisa Teague, and these like ground shaking, elements in these high level games that they're running. And I'm like, yep, my dudes are, exploring a haunted house.
Yeah.
The elements just didn't compare. Everybody had a blast at my table, not only with each other and the environment and the things that were there. It just it wasn't, I feel like, as a big element of like, oh well, this person's getting decapitated by a vorpal sword and the Trask is destroying, all this thing over here. And I'm like, man. So I wanted to present the players with the option of like something that's, a kind of super uber game, but I just don't think that they're looking to go that direction.
Yeah, yeah, which is surprising because I would think like players never get to play those types of games, so I would think they would be chomping at the bit to do it. But also maybe it's a little intimidating, because by that time there's like so much stuff your character can do, and depending on how proficient you are in the game itself, and let's face it, most people aren't going to be super proficient at playing high level characters because most games never see high levels.
Well, one of my players is rather new to the game, so to be like, yeah, we're gonna start it, 16 or higher, like that could be too intimidating
Mm.
for that style of player. So it's like, all right, well, I can certainly back off. I mean, I literally can run any style of game. So I'm here for whatever it is that's going to make the people at my table the happiest.
Here's what you do: you make it a
But I will.
20th level game, but it's all politics.
uh, well, I don't have a huge amount of experience with politics game. Not to say that I couldn't do it, but I would need to begin planning that kind of game, you know, now and put an awful lot of work because like when you're gonna plan that, there needs to be like the advanced amount of like heraldry and backstory and lots of interconnected characters. If I'm gonna do a political game, like I need to be doing some Game of Thrones shit, and there needs to be, the chart where there's all these lines going everywhere if I were to do it proper and proper justice. But I will pause here because we have passed the halfway point. If look around our heads and what have you, you'll see that the live chats are powered by Easy Roller Dice. So you certainly should be checking them out. Link is going to be down in the description as well as a coupon code. They also sponsor our monthly game that we play. Uh, we just started a new game just the other night with this time Robin at the helm, and so we've got the old guard. So be if you're into watching streamed games, be on the lookout for episode 2. Catch up on episode 1 if you haven't seen it. I get to be a player and actually RP with some of these people that I've been running for quite some time. So that is an absolute blast, and we had a ton of fun. We actually ended with mid combat, so we get to like start off next time really in the thick of things. So I'm having a lot of fun with it, even though we've only got one session under our belt. So go check them out. Go check out Easy Roller Dice.
What level are you guys playing?
Fifth,
Fifth.
fifth level. We're all essentially retired adventurers. It's been 20 years since we had basically done some mission together. We all went about in separate ways. Some of us might have stayed together here or there, what have you. We have a one person playing a quote unquote ranger. So he's like, you figure it out, but he's a ranger that's not really a ranger. And I am playing a cleric, and at least for the time being, I have no clerical powers. So it's a little challenging when you're it's like, all right, I've got a proficiency modifier and I've got some skills, but that's it.
It turns out your character really just is really good at scribing.
So it's a lot of fun. Uh, but this group is called the Chaos Crew internally, so we have a lot of fun. There's a lot of great RP, and we have yet another game here on Nerdarchy where the barbarian is somebody to look up to and listen to. So MTD Jake, who is the producer of that that game or that whatnot, um, he is playing a Asimar barbarian with like the dad mentality.
Uh,
He's not significantly older than the rest of us, but it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna be the one to make sure this happens and that happens, and my character, it right from the beginning, so I'm not really spoiling anything, but like my character spent the last few years drunk off his ass because everything he tried to do for 15 years didn't seem to work to get his clerical powers back. So he's a horrible drunk. So
so maybe if he
basically,
just
Jake's
drinks
character,
enough.
I don't know. I don't know. He went down a bad hole and just stayed there. But Jake's character gives me like the stern talking to, and it's like, dude, how 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 messed up is this when like the barbarian is the one, you know, offering the words of wisdom, and it's the cleric that's the screw up.
I just hope his
So
dump stat is wisdom.
as an Asimar barbarian, I don't think it is.
Maybe it depends which version you're playing. Is you're playing the version where stats don't matter and you just put them
No, well,
wherever, or whether you using them where they go.
yeah, I don't particularly know which direction, so I'll have to ask him at some point in time.
So we've been
Uh,
talking. We've been talking in around and about castles as well. It's only fair to mention that if you want to play D&D in a castle with myself or Ted, you could probably still make that happen. Although you are rapidly running out of time, especially if you need a passport because it is in the UK, and I believe there are still some spots open at each of our tables. So the opportunity is there to roll some dice with us in a castle in another country. Unless that is your country, then I guess it's not another country for you. But there's links in the description for that.
yeah, it's gonna be an absolute blast. I'm really looking forward to it. At this point in time, we're like a month and a half away, so I'm getting quite happy with the approaching scenario.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And so are you going to have a castle themed adventure this time? I know your first time
I
we did, the second time we went with mansions. You went with a mansion, and now there's a third time.
so pretty much I've got three games that I'm proposing to my players. The first one is basically inspired by How to Train Your Dragon. It's going to be an island style game. Players are all going to have their wyvern mounts that they get to have, and I've actually already begun working on essentially modified stat blocks. So like they can use it whole cloth as is. It's got a poison stinger tail and this and that, or like remove the stinger tail and it can have a breath weapon, and you whatever you just modifications. I am using one of the concepts that I had thrown out to you guys about an elemental incursion happening that the players are going to have to be able to deal with. So like that one is like geared more towards like the upper echelon of tier 2, designed to fight some pretty big and powerful stuff. And those of you who might be familiar with more of my elemental collection, I've got quite a lot of very fun elemental minis. So I planning to pack up a whole bunch of them and bring them along to the castle. And then the other one, is going to be a bit of a bit of a crazy scenario where I want to basically have players not necessarily muck around with time, but I want them to get caught up in essentially some excursions back in time and experience some of the previous ages. Um, so like it could be like a lower tier game, but getting to play some higher level characters that existed, in the past. So you kind of have like the best of both worlds. Um, and I don't want to give too much away about that one, but I've got some fun things, and if you've been around the channel for a while, you know some of the craziness that has actually happened with some of our previous ages. So I want to have some of that in
So are you thinking like kind of like Quantum Leap style, where like they jump into other people and they become those
there. Yes.
people for? Okay, okay,
Yep.
it
So
could be
I
interesting.
feel I feel like there's some to pardon the pun of elements, but like there's a number of elements that I could really work with, and you they would get as I said, they would get the chance to explore some of those things. And since we haven't really done a huge amount, we've never even declared like, well, what age are we currently in? We know that there was the Age of Dragons, we know that there was the Age of Arcanum, but what else was there? So like I could have a lot of fun and just basically, begin seriously tying down and working what some of these ages were. And as the players get to explore, they themselves will get to kind of write some of the history of our ongoing world.
Yeah. So we're looking at my players so far. They want high magic. Um, one of them wants kind of like a arcane Eberron style campaign. The other one's looking at others are looking at like horror style games. And then, like I said, it's split between like tier 2 and tier 4 right now. So
So
we ran a series on the channel years ago called Other Skies, and I'm like, based on what they're already telling me, I'm like, I wonder if this could be another Skies conversion, and have them do that, which is very much a mix of fantasy and kind of steampunk and eldritch horror.
horror. Yeah, I mean that's where my brain would go when you start saying I want high fantasy, I want steampunk, and I want horror. I'm like, all right, that's pretty much Ether Skies. Um, and it's a great game. You know, you can do an awful lot with that. You can have a lot of fun, and warn the players, man. Like, you know, don't get off the ship because down below is pretty much a no bueno, and you fall off the ship and you're pretty much out of the game.
Well, it'll be fun because I'd have to introduce like insanity and some kind of madness score, as well as maybe a corruption score, and see exactly what that's going to mean. But that would be a lot of fun for me, as the GM, to kind of introduce those elements, and then also for the players, and also I love giving players things where it's like, oh, do you want to use a little bit more power? Do you want to add a little more juice to what you're doing? You can do that, but there's going to be some risk to it. Or your character might go insane or go mad permanently or temporarily, or maybe you take on some corruption, which could manifest in different ways. Their flesh begins rotting. Demonic possession, eldritch possession. Fun stuff.
So I mean, madness is already a thing. I think it's in the DMG.
Yep, it's one of the
Uh,
optional rules.
Yeah. In a typical campaign, characters aren't driven mad by horrors they face and carnage they inflict day after day, but sometimes the stress of being an adventurer can be too much to bear. If your campaign has a strong horror theme, you might want to use madness in a way to reinforce that theme, emphasizing the extraordinary, horrific nature of the threats the adventurers face. And there's rules for going mad, the madness effect, short term madness, long term madness, indefinite madness, as well as rules for curing madness. So, like, it's all there, easily able to be found on D&D Beyond, which is a simple search. So yeah. So I mean, I think that's a no brainer. Like, all right, corruption or madness could kind of be one and the same, and I just have some fun with it.
So, John, one of the things that I struggle with is balancing the genre with mechanics, and I have a tendency to be more interested in writing game settings that are technologically closer to the age of sail. It's not really a problem. It's play whatever's fun for you and your players, right? We've been all over the place, from very low magic, low tech to gunpowder, and the current game I'm running has basically motorcycles, right? So we've kind of run the gambit. I've introduced steam powered armor into the games in the past. It's just it can be a little bit challenging because 5e and D&D in general is very specific, and it's not good at doing a lot of things that, especially when you're talking about modern. Like, it's not very satisfying to use firearms in D&D because they're basically the same as using any other weapon, where you just feel like a
Right.
firearm should be more impressive. Matter of fact, like, some of the firearms like have less range than the longbow. So, and
Yep.
with the
Because
damage not being that different.
you're people are looking at it as, oh, well, I know what a sniper rifle can do. Well, yeah, a modern day sniper rifle is very different, than, say, like a black powder musket. So sure, if you're going to play a modern game, like you need this. Oh, yeah, it's a quarter mile to a half mile away. Yeah, I can hit that shit. But game doesn't have those kinds of things. But you could certainly create those rules, and you could just be like, all right, um, you know, have fun with it. But with the fact of a modern day sniper rifle, it doesn't matter how much of a badass you are. If you get hit in the head, you're dead. Like, it's designed to kill people. So to try and bring something like that into D&D, it doesn't really fit. So like that's why you have to like figure out, well, what does firearms mean for your game? So
Well, that's what I mean.
yeah,
But even like black powder weapons, there's a reason why, like, in warfare they stopped using the longbow and went to the musket, right?
sure,
So it's still a bit dissatisfying, and the problem is, you kind of talk about it a little bit in the sense that, like, it would be so much more devastating, if the musket did comparably more damage than other weapons. It's not the problem. People think it's the problem, like, giving it to the players and the players being too powerful. It's not. The problem really is when it's used against the players. It's a much bigger problem, right? Like, if you
um,
take kobolds and goblins and give them muskets that are amped up to be more in line, with the effectiveness of a musket compared to the longbow, as time progressed, like, that is going to hurt a lot.
yep, because it takes considerably less training to use a firearm than it does a longbow. Now, I don't have a huge amount of experience with firearms, but what I have used, like, the mechanics are far simpler. You don't have, like, while you've got more moving parts, it doesn't require as much precision to do everything. And I am not in any way, shape, or form trying to slight anyone who has skill with either of them. I am a horrible shot no matter what I use. I know that I've spent a lot of hours, training, not training, but shooting, a bow and arrow, and I've done far better with an actual firearm than I have with the bow and arrow. And I'm like, same dexterity, same, not even same time, but far more accurate with the gun.
Well, I think it takes more skill to fire a bow than it
Yeah.
does to fire a gun. And then also guns just do way more damage. So,
Uh-huh.
um, John, I think that is a problem many people have. I've recently started running PF2E, but I ran 5e for years. I guess I just struggle with spending a lot of time modding the core game to fit a new game or style. I mod 5e maybe too much. That's why sometimes it's just easier to pick up another game. Like, most of the time, when people will spend so much time trying to mod out 5e or any game really, like, there's probably another game that's just designed to do that thing, and it is so much easier to just play that game a lot of times. Like you could like rewrite Star Wars, or you could just go play one of the 15 Star Wars games there are already. So and many of
Yes.
them are very good. So
Yeah, and every game system out there has something, to be a takeaway from it, and it's about, what you want to do with the game. I've I've modded up games and I've modded down games, but like there's always a way to just be like, well, is there another game out there that's going to do what I'm looking for that my players are going to be able to handle? In at a recent get together, uh, I modded down 5e so that players could make quick characters and get into a very narrative style game. So we had a lot of fun with it. Uh, and then I've added features and things to, like, to 5e, like Dave says, like we're currently, we've modified the Devil's Ride for our essentially D&D motorcycle guy. Um, so like there's ways to add in fun things, but in the end, you sometimes have to ask: is there another system that's going to run this kind of stuff better for quicker games? Like, you might want to play Index Card RPG or Easy D6. Both games allow for quick creation of characters, simplistic rules, get right into the action as opposed to like pulling out a whole cloth. Um, oh well, what character class, background, and race. Like sometimes you don't need all that.
sometimes you don't need all that. I will say one of the failings of our own like world building and the campaigns we've been playing in, we don't have any notable castles. I can't think of one notable castle we've created. Like, there's always castles, but it's like the palace. It's the center of the city, right, where the
Yeah.
king rules from or whatever. But it's definitely something that we haven't spent a lot of time and lore in, because I don't think we run. Well, one, you kind of touched on a little bit. We don't do a lot of political stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
seats of powers and that type of things. I feel like it when
Well,
we get closer to running more political, it's more like down in the gutter amongst the like thieves guild and the riffraff than it is the upper echelons of
sure.
society.
Now, inspired by my somewhat recent game of actually being a player in a political game, my enjoyment of Game of Thrones, I have actually, while I'm not really doing Dungeon 23, making daily progress, I have begun formulating Dralic, um, and I've actually begun work in that area. There is. Oh crap! It's not there.
It's gone.
It's on. I was trying to see if there was a short key or shortcut to it, um, but Dralic is made up of 7 kingdoms. Uh, the seventh kind of being added after the fact, um, but you've got the 6 kingdoms of Draxmith, Ravenhall, Axelwood, Londmore, Umberford, and Crenelly, all with the first letter of that name, spelling out Dralic, which is the center of the kingdom. Very much inspired by Game of Thrones. They've kind of have the, almost a. I'm trying to come up with a different term, but you know, they take turns in the seat of power. It's not just like, okay, one house rules and that's just how it goes. Um, but I've begun formulating, what each, not kingdom, because the whole thing is a kingdom, but what each area is known for, what kind of peoples live there, what have you, what kind of alliances are all built within. But I've begun formulating all of that. So obviously that's going to be a number of castles related to, each of those. Um, and then like we visited Dralic in a couple of different games. When you visited Glory, there was a castle there. But again, it was nothing more than the seat of power. We didn't really highlight much of what makes this castle stand out and what have you.
So isn't that what the Telltale series? Isn't that how they do the rolling? The what are they called? They're elves. The can't think of it. What is it? It's a weird name. Dreg. Because like the nobles were all the elves, but they called them something
Mhm.
else. But they're basically the elves. But they had
Yeah,
the 12 or 13 houses, and I feel like they rotated the rulership in there.
uh,
But I haven't read the Telltale's books in it's been years since
yeah.
I read any of them.
It came up in conversation last night, and I'm like, yeah, it has been 5 or 6 or more years since I've done anything with Talthos. So, yeah, you guys have your conversation. I'm just gonna sit here and feel like a fool.
Well, I probably read them just after you did because I always get the books from you. Ted's my library, so he buys the books, he reads them, then I read them.
It's true. Nowadays, you just tend to do everything with audiobooks. So,
I
what have
do.
you? I haven't haven't read a whole lot recently. I've been spending more time with streaming services or watching gameplays on YouTube. So
Each to their own. So that might be a project that we need to undertake is to add some notable castles to our world.
well, I can certainly share the Kingdom of Dralic with you, and you can decide to expand upon and what have you.
Yeah, I have to see what kind of castles spring up in Under the Dome.
Mm,
Although
that could
I
be
feel
fun.
like you guys are trying to build your own right now.
We
That's what Ryan had put in the chat. He's trying. He wants. I
oh
think he wants to build his own dome on on the floating island that you guys just recently encountered.
oh yeah, I missed that part of the chat.
Yeah. So yeah, in my recent game, they encountered a chaos storm, which is a big part of like the Under the Dome game. That's why they all live under the domes because there's no chaos storms inside the domes. And one of the chaos effects was like a huge swath of land getting ripped out of the ground and just floating 40 feet in the air.
Yeah, my memory of that was Josh's character trying to convince us that we need to
Mm.
bring people out here to worship the crystal elephant.
Yeah. There's a call for there's cries for Castle Griffin Gaff.
Well, I mean, given the the history of Griffin Gaff, it's not it might not be out of the realm of possibility of there being a castle built there at some point in time in the future.
So when we actually were playing those campaigns, I I think it was just a mayor's manor, right? Like it was more like bureaucracy and official offices and things of that nature. More so, I think the library was more impressive than and more castle like than the actual seat of power for Griffin Gap.
Yeah, because the elves had built it as opposed to like common folk. Because when Griffin
Yeah.
Gap was made, it was just a town, and it was like a boom town when we started. And then over the course of 2 campaigns, with all these things going on, like lots of traffic and lots of people, you had the influx of the people going in reverse order. The refugees from Rylor, the people from the Clockwork Kingdom, the I wanted to call them the Draconians, but the Dragonborns, not invading, but coming through the portal. Um, there's been all kinds of different peoples coming to, this part of the world, and they're being drawn in. Then we had the attacks of the Bulgarians. You had the attacks of the fiendish orcs. So like that's a lot's happened. But like now you've got this like expansive city with like multiple circular walls separating different sections of the city. So I imagine like where I'm playing now, it's pretty much been a handful of decades past
Mhm.
when that event happened. So like it's still early enough for those characters to be alive, um, but late enough that there could have been progress, from those kinds of things. So like when you've got characters like Falcor and Relion who were like, oh yeah, I'm not going anywhere for a year. All right, I'm just gonna build new this building and
Yeah.
make it a daily thing. So like, you could have a new library, you could have a new thing from, the spells that those high level characters could do. We know that like they're not the only ones. Like there's other characters that have come into those games. I know the one character, even though she was in the Scarlet Sisterhood only for a handful of sessions, she was a high level cleric too. So, I had reached out to her and like she was planning to have her character retire, and try to figure out what was going on with Elliot. So
John, so we got a bunch of products on the store that we consider to be like loosely connected to the Nerdarchy verse, since it's basically all stuff that's come about through our videos, and some of them, a lot of the stuff from our games as well. So, but it's not
well,
very coherent, I would say, as a
well,
setting per se.
to answer your question, no, we've never released our campaign setting. While we enjoy playing in it, um, as far as campaign settings go, it doesn't. It's pretty vanilla, and we feel it doesn't have enough things to really make it shine. We've made changes to our world over the course of a variety of different games. So the fact that part of the world has been broken and there's now, a handful of floating continents and, chaos storms have become a little bit more common in certain areas. Like, all right, those could be, a little bit of fun to play with, but like I don't feel it's enough to really be like, yep, you need to have this campaign setting at your table.
Yeah, like I mean, your game is set a ways in the future, where mine is like far flung into the future, basically post-apocalyptic, Ulfgania, compared to just a little bit of time has gone past.
But I mean, I think the thing that we could do is like, all right, you want to modify your world, like, we could write up things, whether it be a blog post or a product, but like for the, as my players kept saying, oh, the breaking of the world, I
Yeah,
could explain the mindset of how, these different islands happen, what caused it, and what can be gotten out of it. It would create some conflict. It would create some new item types and this and that, and then like we could create a product for what is a chaos storm, how does it use, what does it do. We could put all of that together, but you know other than that, like you could just use those to modify whatever world you're playing.
for sure. So on that note, we're just past the hour mark, but I was gonna say we'll be back here Tuesday, but we won't be back here Tuesday. We are taking we took last week off from our game, and this week we're doing a session 0 for our next game, which will be a sci-fi horror game, Vast Grim, run by Carlos Rivera, Volcanic Night over on YouTube. So not this Tuesday, but the following, we're going to be kicking off that game. So if you want to see us try and survive in outer space, and not get devoured by worms or become infested with worms, basically, I don't know. I always equate the them to being like space zombies, but it's more like
Yeah,
a space zombie collective than anything. You can come hang out with us as we do that in 2 weeks, and we'll be back here next Sunday. And until next time, stay nerdy.
still